You are settling into the quiet of the night, the soft rhythm of your breath finding a gentle pace. Outside, the world is silent, and in that silence, history waits, patient and still. Tonight, we drift far away from the noise of the day, across time and centuries, to a city that has never truly slept, a place where stone remembers more than any living voice, a place called Rome. The air is warm, the kind that moves slowly through narrow streets, carrying the scent of dust, of marble, of something eternal. The lights fade, and in the heart of the city, a great circle of arches glows faintly under the moon. It is not loud, not proud anymore, only vast and calm, a monument that stands like a dream half remembered. This is the Colosseum. Once it rose with purpose, built by hands that shaped the will of an empire. Every block of stone placed carefully, every arch aligned to the rhythm of design and power. Its builders could not have known that one day it would become not a stage of sound, but a cradle of silence. Time softens all things, and even the grandest voices fade until only whispers remain. The Colosseum whispers still. It stands on what was once a lake, part of an emperor's private garden. When that emperor fell from grace, his successors decided to give the space back to the people. From the ground of Nero's lost palace, they raised a monument to unity and control, a statement of peace built from the stones of ambition. In its early days, the Colosseum was not yet called by that name, but known simply as the Flavian Amphitheater, after the family of emperors who gave it life. The first light of morning in ancient Rome would strike its upper tiers and turn them golden, reflecting across the marble facades, awakening the city. Tens of thousands of citizens once filled those arches, each seat placed with mathematical care so that the empire itself could watch its reflection in miniature. Organized, ordered, immense. Beneath the stands, tunnels ran like veins beneath skin, carrying workers, animals, and equipment unseen but essential. For the people of Rome, it was more than entertainment. It was proof that their world could build something permanent, something so vast it seemed to touch the sky. The sound of their footsteps would echo in long corridors, the murmurs of expectation rising like a tide. But those sounds have long since gone. What remains is the slow, steady breath of time. The wind moving through open arches, the small sounds of stone against stone, and the memory of hands that once shaped them. As centuries passed, the Colosseum changed. Its walls no longer shone. The marble was stripped away, carried through the city to decorate new buildings. The empire that had built it had vanished into memory, and Rome, eternal yet aging, began to forget what this great circle had meant. Yet it remained. Weathered, cracked, but still immense, it watched over the centuries in silence. Now, if you stand within its shadow, in the quiet hours before dawn, you can almost hear the rhythm of those early builders. The faint sound of chisels, the weight of blocks being lifted into place, the creak of wooden scaffolds, and the low voices of men who would never see their names carved anywhere. They worked for something greater than themselves, something that against all odds still stands. And so tonight, as we rest and wander in thought, we begin our slow journey through its story. A story not of noise or spectacle, but of endurance, of stone that has outlived the empire that built it. The Colosseum is not only what remains of Rome, it is what remains of time itself, turned to shape and shadow. This is where our night begins. In the heart of an ancient city, under the quiet gaze of arches that have seen everything and have nothing left to prove. The birth of a monument. The Colosseum was born from both purpose and recovery. Rome had endured a long season of unrest, a fire that had torn through its heart, and an emperor whose name carried the weight of excess. When the Flavian dynasty took power, they sought not glory in isolation but restoration in form, to give back what had been taken from the people. It was not merely a gesture of kindness but of balance, a way to replace chaos with order, vanity with structure, and fear with the calm of familiar strength. The ground they chose was still marked by the ruins of Nero's vast palace, the Domus Aurea, where private gardens and artificial lakes had once stretched beneath gilded ceilings. The new emperor, Vespasian, walked those empty grounds and decided that where a single man had once ruled in private, 1,000 men would build in public. In that choice, the Colosseum was conceived. The work began quietly, as all great works do, with the clearing of earth and the soft sound of tools meeting soil. Thousands of hands came together, laborers, engineers, stonemasons, slaves, and freedmen, all contributing to a single purpose. The rhythm of their effort became the heartbeat of the site, a steady pulse that grew stronger with each passing day. Beneath the Roman sun, stones of pale gold were hauled from the quarries of Tivoli. The travertine blocks arrived in endless procession, each marked and measured, each destined for a specific place. They built with a precision that seemed almost divine in its patience, setting one layer upon another until the outer wall began to curve into being, a rising halo of stone against the skyline. The design was practical, not ceremonial, but in its very precision lay a quiet beauty. 4 levels of arches framed the air, each tier slightly smaller than the one below, giving the structure both strength and grace. The lower arches supported the weight of crowds and corridors, while the upper levels balanced the entire form, allowing it to appear lighter than its mass suggested. Inside, passageways spiraled like veins, connecting every seat and stair, every entry and exit. It was said that when the amphitheater was first imagined, it was meant not only to contain people, but to reflect the order of the empire itself. Each class had its place, every row and section carefully marked. From the senators closest to the arena to the distant citizens who watched from the heights, Rome's social structure was mirrored in its architecture. Yet the act of gathering, of watching together, created a sense of unity that transcended those boundaries, if only for a moment. As construction continued, the sound of progress filled the air. Hammers against stone, chisels shaping detail, ropes tightening, scaffolds creaking. The city grew accustomed to the hum of creation, as if the monument itself was breathing along with Rome. The amphitheater took nearly a decade to rise, each year adding weight and purpose. Vespasian would not live to see its completion, but his son Titus would open its gates to the world. When at last it stood finished, it was not just an amphitheater, but a statement. From every approach into the city, its curves drew the eye. No temple, no palace, no monument had stood quite like it. It could hold more than 50,000 souls, arranged in rings that encircled the arena floor. Beneath that floor, hidden from view, lay the hypogeum, a labyrinth of tunnels and chambers where lifts, pulleys, and platforms could raise and lower whatever the day required. In those first days, the amphitheater must have seemed alive. Flags fluttered at its peaks, and the air carried the murmur of voices as crowds filled the steps. The sand of the arena gleamed pale beneath the sun. Yet, even then, before the years had worn it smooth, there was something eternal in its silence between the sounds, a pause that suggested it would outlast those who entered. The inaugural games were long, stretching over weeks, filled with spectacle and display. But the building itself was the true wonder, the quiet perfection of its arches and the steady discipline of its construction, It did not boast or sing, it simply existed, immovable and sure. In its shadow, the empire saw itself reflected, vast, organized, enduring. The materials spoke of intelligence rather than extravagance. The outer shell of travertine, the interior of tufa and brick, the careful use of concrete where flexibility was needed. Every piece was chosen with purpose, every decision made with an understanding that this was not merely for the present, but for the ages. The builders worked not for praise, but for permanence, trusting that what they shaped would stand when they were gone. Inside the amphitheater, corridors curved endlessly, guiding the flow of visitors with quiet logic. The architects had mastered movement. People entered and exited with ease, thousands passing without collision. Even the smallest details, from the placement of stairs to the slope of seating, had been thought through. It was a structure built for humanity, for gathering, for presence. When the day's light began to fade and the crowds drifted away, the amphitheater would remain, empty, yet full of the warmth of human breath and sound. The torches would be extinguished one by one until only the moonlight rested on its upper arches. The city would quiet again, and the Colosseum would stand in peace, as if breathing softly through the night, waiting for another dawn. In the centuries that followed, no other structure would match its presence. Others would rise, and others would fall, but the Colosseum remained the perfect circle of Rome's ambition. Not the story of triumph, but the story of endurance. Built from what once symbolized excess, it became the monument of restoration, the place where the empire rebuilt its image from the ground up. Even now, its arches hold the memory of those who built it. They left no signatures, no names carved into stone, yet their labor is written in every curve, every seam. It is the quiet kind of immortality, the kind that needs no voice. The Colosseum stands not as a relic of power, but as a reminder of what can endure when purpose meets patience. And so it remains through centuries of light and dust, through the rise and fall of all things, the great circle of stone that once began as a promise that Rome, no matter what came, would stand again. Stone and silence. The Colosseum stands as a monument not only of power, but of precision. When you look at its walls, rising tier upon tier, you are seeing the patience of countless minds and hands. Each stone was shaped to fit another, each curve designed to hold the weight of those above it. It was an achievement not born of chance, but of discipline, of a deep understanding of balance, proportion, and endurance. The Romans knew their materials well. They built not merely for function, but for time. Travertine stone, drawn from the quarries of Tivoli, formed the skin of the amphitheater. Hard yet porous, light enough to breathe with the weather, strong enough to last through centuries. Beneath that elegant outer layer, tufa and brick gave the structure its inner strength. Between the two, the Romans poured concrete, their quiet innovation, a material both humble and eternal. Concrete was their invisible gift to the future. Unlike the polished marble of temples, it did not gleam in sunlight, it did not speak of wealth or decoration, it spoke of permanence. Inside the walls of the Colosseum, it filled the spaces between stone, binding everything together like the memory of labor itself. Over time, it hardened not only into structure but into silence, a silence that holds the echo of every sound that once passed through its corridors. If you walk there now, you can still feel the intention of those who built it. The arches rise in rhythm, repeating like the calm breath of the earth. Each curve leads to another, guiding your eyes upward until you lose yourself in geometry. The stone does not shout, it hums, a deep note that seems to come from within the ground. The engineers who designed it understood something simple and profound, that space, if shaped with care, could speak without sound. The Colosseum's inner corridors were arranged like the veins of a living being, each pathway connected, each turn purposeful. There was symmetry in every direction and balance in every line. Even in its immensity, it never feels heavy. The air moves freely through its arches, carrying with it the quiet pulse of the city beyond. Beneath the arena lay another world, unseen by those above. The Hypogum, a labyrinth of tunnels and chambers carved from darkness. Here, the air was cooler, stiller, the walls damp with time. Wooden lifts once rose through hidden shafts, bringing animals and machinery to the light above. The design was not only functional but rhythmic, each mechanism timed, each gate controlled. Even in the unseen spaces there was order. Now those tunnels lie open to the sky, the wooden floors long gone, replaced by shadows and echoes. When the wind moves through them, it sounds almost like breathing. A deep, slow breath that fills the emptiness and lets it rest again. In those moments, the Colosseum feels alive, not as it once was, but in the way old things live, and quietly, patiently, without demand. The silence here is not empty. It carries weight. It remembers footsteps, voices, the shift of light through centuries. It remembers the sound of rain against travertine, the slow erosion of corners, the growth of moss where no one walks. Time has softened its edges, worn down its symmetry, but has not undone it. The stones still fit, the arches still stand, the structure still breathes. Every surface tells a story, written not in words, but in texture. The rough walls bear traces of iron clamps once used to hold blocks together, the grooves still visible, the metal long taken away. Plants grow where cracks invite them, their roots finding places between the stones, their green softening the grey. The air smells faintly of dust and earth, of age without decay. In the early hours, when the sun begins to rise and the first light touches its upper arches, the Colosseum turns golden again. The colour is soft, like the first breath of dawn over sleeping stone. Birds rest on ledges where once flags flew, their wings tracing circles in the air. The city begins to stir, but inside the amphitheater, the stillness remains. It holds the sound of the present the way it once held the sound of the past, gently, without resistance. There is peace in its endurance. It has seen the fall of emperors, the passing of centuries, the transformation of Rome itself, yet it endures with quiet dignity. The stones have no memory of victory or defeat, they remember only existence. In their calm they offer perspective, that strength is not noise, that permanence is not pride, that beauty can live in restraint. The Colosseum was built to hold voices, and now it holds their absence. That absence has become its voice. It speaks not in language, but in stillness, reminding those who stand within it that time does not erase, it reshapes. What once was thunderous becomes tranquil. What once drew crowds now draws quiet contemplation. To stand inside is to stand within the rhythm of centuries. The arches curve above like the ribs of a giant shell, and every sound that rises is softened, turned inward. Even footsteps seem to move slower, as if unwilling to disturb what has been asleep for so long. The silence is not heavy, it is kind. It allows the mind to wander, to imagine, without urgency. In that space you feel both small and infinite. The structure dwarfs you yet welcomes you. Its vastness does not intimidate, it comforts. The stones around you are cool to the touch, smooth, where thousands of hands once passed. When you place your palm upon them, you can almost feel the faint hum of time, slow and deep, stretching back 2,000 years. The air within the Colosseum carries its own kind of rhythm. It moves differently through the open arches, stirring dust and light. When the wind crosses the arena, it creates a low tone, like the sound of distant water or the quiet breath of earth itself. It is the voice of stone, the soft language of endurance. Every night, the Colosseum rests. The city sleeps around it, cars fade, footsteps vanish, and the monument remains. Unblinking, unchanging, serene. The moon climbs its arches and lays silver light upon its walls, tracing every crack and curve. Shadows shift slowly, marking the passage of hours. Within that great circle, time seems to stop, or perhaps it only slows enough for you to feel it passing. To some, it is a ruin. To others, a masterpiece. But to the night, it is neither. It is simply presence. The still heart of a city that has changed 1,000 times. It does not mourn what is lost, nor seek what is to come. It just remains perfectly balanced between what was and what will be. And as you breathe and the rhythm of your thoughts slows, you begin to understand the lesson written in its walls, that silence can hold as much meaning as sound, that endurance can be as gentle as it is strong, and that within the stillness of stone lies a story that has never truly ended. Days of spectacle. The Colosseum, in its earliest days of use, was a living heartbeat within the city. Its stone walls, now calm and quiet, once carried the pulse of thousands. Each morning, as the sun rose over the hills of Rome, the amphitheater shimmered like a golden ring, catching the light across its arches. The streets leading to its gates filled slowly with people, their footsteps blending into a hum of anticipation that seemed to rise from the earth itself. The people came not from one place but from every corner of the empire, merchants, travelers, artisans, soldiers, and families. For many, this was the center of their world, the place where Rome revealed itself. The amphitheater did not belong to the few, it belonged to the many. Its open arches were an invitation, and its grand scale was a promise that something beyond the ordinary waited inside. As the crowds entered, they moved with quiet order. The design of the Colosseum guided them effortlessly through its corridors and stairways. Each person knew where to go, each level found its balance. The marble seats, arranged in perfect rings, shone faintly in the early light. Far above, a vast canopy, the velarium, was unfurled by sailors trained in the art of ropes and sails. The fabric stretched gently across the sky, shading the upper rows, rippling like a pale cloud caught between earth and heaven. When the people settled, a hush would fall, the kind that arrives not from silence, but from unity. 50,000 voices stilled at once, 50,000 eyes turned toward the same point, the open arena below. From the upper seats, the ellipse of sand looked like sunlight itself, bright, smooth, and waiting. Beneath that surface, hidden doors and passages led into darkness. Above it, the light was pure and still. The events that followed were the rhythm of Rome's grandeur, not the noise of chaos, but the measured pulse of ceremony. The amphitheater was a stage, and Rome was the performer. Every movement was planned, every sequence timed. Musicians played from the upper galleries, their instruments echoing softly against the stone. The sound was neither loud nor hurried. It filled the air with an ancient calm, guiding the audience into the shared ritual of spectacle. There were moments of surprise, but never of disorder. The coordination was as intricate as the structure itself. Doors opened precisely when they should, platforms rose without a sound, and the arena floor transformed with quiet efficiency. The Colosseum was a machine of motion and stillness, its mechanisms hidden, its results effortless. For the citizens, these gatherings were not only amusement, they were affirmation. In the vast circle of stone, they saw the strength of their empire reflected back to them. The architecture, the scale, the harmony, all were reminders that Rome endured, that its order reached even into entertainment. Yet, even in those times of noise and gathering, there existed a space between sounds, a moment of pause in which the enormity of it all settled into stillness. The sun would climb higher, tracing patterns across the tiers. Shadows lengthened, then softened. The air inside the amphitheater grew warmer, heavy with the scent of sand and stone. Vendors moved quietly along the corridors, their voices distant and low. The murmurs of the crowd rose and fell like waves, never breaking, never disturbing the deep rhythm of the place. In those long days, the Colosseum lived its purpose. It was not a ruin then, not a relic. It was the center of the world. And yet, even in its fullness, you can imagine that somewhere deep in the foundations, silence waited patiently, knowing it would return when all this had passed. As dusk approached, the light shifted, the arena glowed softly, the marble steps turning amber in the fading sun. The crowds began to leave, their footsteps echoing through the arches. The great canopy was drawn in, folding slowly upon itself like the wings of a bird. The torches were lit one by one, and the smell of smoke mingled with the cool of the evening. Outside, Rome continued to hum. Markets closing, carts moving, the distant bells of temples marking the hour. But inside, within those massive walls, the day's noise dissolved into quiet once more. The workers cleaned the sand, brushed away footprints, and reset what needed resetting. Their movements were steady, practiced, unspoken. When they finished, they would look out across the empty space and see the same quiet that fills it now. The Colosseum was more than a place of gathering. It was a breathing part of the city. It held not only sound and spectacle, but also routine, the rhythm of preparation, the care of maintenance, the patience of those who served it. Every day that passed deepened its presence, turning stone into memory. Even those who lived in its shadow grew used to its constancy. From the nearby hills, people could see its arches glowing at sunset, the sky behind it a wash of red and gold. From the narrow streets below, they could hear the soft echo of voices within, as if the air itself were alive. For them, it was a part of daily life, a reminder that Rome, vast and powerful, could still create beauty in structure and order. And then, as night descended, peace would return fully. The gates were closed, the corridors emptied, the wind moved softly through the arches. The same moon that shines on its stones today would rise over the city, casting light across its upper tiers. The amphitheater would rest again, not asleep, but waiting. What makes the Colosseum remarkable is not only what it once contained, but what remains after all has faded. The echoes of those days do not haunt, they soothe. The energy that once filled its corridors has settled into calm. Every block of stone that once bore the weight of applause now holds the gentler weight of time. There is a serenity in imagining it as it was, not in the roar or the movement, but in the pattern, the order, the collective breath of thousands who look together toward the same horizon. It was, in its essence, a human creation, imperfect, vast, alive. And though centuries have passed, the sense of that unity still lingers in the quiet air that moves through its ruins. If you stand there now in the cool of evening, you might feel the faint impression of those days. the sound of distant footsteps that no longer exist, the echo of a voice carried on the wind. They are not ghosts, only memories made of air and dust. The amphitheater remembers without longing, without regret. It simply holds what has been, gently, like a hand holding light. The Colosseum's days of spectacle were never truly about spectacle alone. They were about the act of gathering, of being part of something larger than oneself. That desire to come together, to witness, to share, has never left humanity. It has only changed its form. And so, as we listen to the quiet of what remains, we understand that the noise was never the story. The story has always been the silence that follows, the stillness that stays after the crowd departs, the peace that lingers when the dust settles. That silence is the soul of the Colosseum, the same silence that carries across centuries, through stone and shadow, into the calm of this very night. Echoes of decline. When the days of gathering faded, the Colosseum remained, a hollow circle of quiet stone beneath an ever-changing sky. The empire that had filled its seats began to change, slowly at first, then all at once. The rhythm of Rome shifted, its heart beating to a different pace. Trade moved elsewhere, power drifted to new rulers, and the voices that once filled the amphitheater grew faint, like a memory softening at the edges. No single moment ended its age of spectacle. The decline came quietly, as most endings do. One season after another, the games became fewer, the crowds smaller, the air heavier with silence. What had once been a place of gathering became a place of stillness. The sand, once raked daily by careful hands, began to gather dust. The gates were opened less often, until one day they were not opened at all. In those first years of quiet, the Colosseum stood untouched, its walls still proud, its arches still whole. The people of Rome passed by it daily, no longer drawn inside, but unable to forget it. It was a landmark of the familiar, a companion to the skyline. Yet within, the wind moved through empty corridors and the sound of footsteps vanished. The centuries that followed were not kind, nor cruel. They were patient. The amphitheater watched as the empire that built it dissolved into fragments. New rulers rose, new faiths took root, new languages filled the air. Rome did not vanish, but it changed its face, and the Colosseum changed with it. Without its purpose, the structure adapted. The seats that once held citizens now held birds and wind. Rainwater pooled where torches had burned. The arena floor, left uncovered, filled with weeds and wildflowers that took root between the stones. Nature, gentle and persistent, began her slow work of reclamation. The people of the city saw it differently now. To some it was a monument to the past, to others a source of material for the future. Its marble, smooth and pale, was useful for building. Workers came in quiet groups, removing blocks and columns, carrying them through the streets. Piece by piece, the Colosseum gave itself back to Rome. Its stones became walls of churches, steps of palaces, foundations of new homes. The amphitheater did not resist, it merely lessened, as if it knew that its body could help the city live on. Through it all, the structure never lost its dignity. Even half ruined, it remained vast and still. The upper arches stood open to the wind, their edges softened by time. The walls no longer echoed with voices, but with the sounds of weather, the whisper of rain, the sigh of wind, the distant roll of thunder. The silence became its new companion, and silence, unlike the crowd, never left. Earthquakes came and went, the ground beneath Rome shifted, and the Colosseum trembled with it. One by one, the southern arches cracked, and portions of the wall collapsed in slow motion, the stones falling like heavy breaths. Dust rose, settled again, and time continued. The ruin that remained was no longer perfect, but it was beautiful in its imperfection. To walk near it then was to feel the presence of both life and loss. The structure seemed alive, though broken, a living memory of endurance. Ivy crawled along its edges, birds nested in its openings, grass filled the spaces where crowds once stood. It had become a garden of stone. The city around it grew smaller, humbler, its grand avenues narrowing into quiet streets. Yet the Colosseum still dominated the landscape, an ancient horizon in the heart of the living. People began to build small houses in its shadow, even within its lower arches. Families found shelter in its vastness. For them, it was not a ruin, but a home. There were times when storms would pass over Rome, lightning tracing the sky above the amphitheater. The rain would fall in sheets, filling the corridors, dripping from the old stones like tears. And when the storm ended, the air would be fresh again, the stones shining with water, the silence deeper and clearer than before. It was during these centuries that the Colosseum began to fade from memory as an arena, and instead became something else, a monument of endurance. Travelers who reached Rome would stop and stare, not because of what had happened inside, but because of what remained outside. The sheer persistence of it inspired quiet wonder. Even in decay, it seemed deliberate, purposeful, eternal. The ruin carried no bitterness. It had seen too much to grieve. It had watched the rise of emperors, the fall of dynasties, the slow drift of history. It knew that everything that stands must one day fall, and that even in falling, there is grace. The broken arches did not mourn what was lost. They framed the sky that replaced it. Through the Middle Ages, it became a part of Rome's rhythm once more, but in a gentler way. Markets were held nearby, and travelers would rest against its walls. Children played in its shadow, their laughter mixing with the wind. The amphitheater no longer commanded the world, it watched it quietly. At night, the moonlight turned its arches silver, outlining every curve, every fracture. The city would sleep around it, the hum of the day fading to whispers. In that stillness, the Colosseum seemed almost awake, as if listening to the slow passage of time. The stars reflected faintly in the pools that had formed where rainwater gathered, and in their reflection, the ruin seemed whole again. The people of Rome began to weave stories about it, legends that blurred fact and memory. Some said it was haunted by the echoes of its past. Others believed it was protected, watched over by time itself. The truth was simpler. The Colosseum was not haunted, it was remembering. It remembered every voice, every step, every sound that had once touched its stones. But it remembered gently, without attachment. As centuries turned, the amphitheater stood as both ruin and monument, a reminder of what had been and what could still endure. Artists painted it, poets described it, travelers wrote of its silence. Each saw something different. Some saw loss, some saw peace, but all agreed it carried the weight of eternity. The Colosseum had entered its second life. No longer a place of performance, it had become a place of reflection. It taught by existing, by remaining. It whispered to all who passed that beauty does not end when perfection fades, and that what time takes away in form, it often gives back in soul. When morning came, light would sweep across its arches, filling the gaps where marble once was. The sun touched every fracture and made it shine. Birds gathered on its upper rims, greeting the day with their gentle songs. The wind passed through and carried their sound across the city. and for a brief moment, the Colosseum felt alive again, not with noise but with harmony. Its decline was not a fall, it was a transformation. It had simply changed its purpose, as all great things eventually do. It had moved from spectacle to silence, from glory to grace, from the noise of the living to the peace of the eternal. And so it stands still in quiet acceptance of its age. Its stones may crumble, its arches may lean, but its presence remains unbroken. It is the proof that even in ruin there can be beauty, and in silence there can be strength. The Colosseum endures not in defiance of time, but in harmony with it, its echo fading only to reveal the deeper music of its stillness. Stone broken by earth and men. The Colosseum had survived the quiet centuries with patience. It had learned the rhythm of the seasons, the slow drift of clouds, the passing of light across its arches. It had grown used to stillness, but even stone, given enough time, begins to move. The earth itself shifted beneath Rome, as if sighing under the weight of its own memories, and what had stood so proudly began to bend, to fracture, to fall. The first great tremor came without warning. The people of Rome awoke to a sound they could not name, not thunder, not wind, but the deep groan of the earth itself. Beneath their feet, the ground rippled like water, and far across the city the Colosseum shuddered. For a moment, it stood as it always had, silent and sure. Then the southern wall began to give. Massive stones, each weighing the measure of men and beasts, shifted in place, loosened from their bonds and tumbled downward.
The collapse was not sudden, not violent. It was slow, almost graceful, a kind of surrender. The air filled with dust, soft and golden, and when it cleared, half the great outer ring had vanished. The open side revealed the interior, the bones of the amphitheater, the corridors, the ribs of its design. The city watched in awe, not with fear, for even in ruin the Colosseum remained beautiful.
After the earthquake, Rome grew quieter still. People spoke of the event for years, but life continued. The fallen stones lay where they had landed, massive and still, their edges rounded by time. Grass grew between them. Travelers walked among the rubble, touching the surfaces that had once stood high above their reach. The ruin no longer felt like loss, it felt like revelation. The inside had been shown, the hidden structure laid bare. The Colosseum, once whole, now lived in two halves, one standing, one resting. Together they formed a new kind of harmony. The city accepted this change as naturally as the turning of seasons. To the Romans, the amphitheater was no longer a place of gathering, but a companion, an elder whose silence carried wisdom. In the years that followed, smaller earthquakes came and went, each taking a little more. Time and weather worked gently on what remained, softening sharp edges, opening new cracks where moss could grow. The arches that once framed sunlight now framed emptiness and sky. The ruin did not resist. It simply changed shape, adapting again to the rhythm of the earth. Yet the earth was not the only hand that shaped it. Humanity, ever practical, saw the fallen stones and found in them purpose. Builders came, careful but determined, prying loose the blocks that could still be carried. The Colosseum gave its strength to the rest of Rome. Its marble steps became altars and stairways. Its pillars became columns in palaces and basilicas. Its bones scattered across the city like seeds. To some, this taking seemed an act of loss, but in truth, it was continuity. The Colosseum had not died, it had dispersed. Its stones lived again in new forms, bearing the same light, the same rain, the same Roman air. It had simply traded grandeur for humility, trading height for presence. The city that once gathered within it now carried it within itself. Through it all, the remaining half still stood. The northern arches, strong and steadfast, became a symbol of resilience. They rose above the fallen side like a wave caught in stillness. Travelers marveled at how much had survived. Artists painted it from every angle, the broken edge, the sweeping curve, the play of light and shadow across its face. In their eyes, the ruin was not an end, but a transformation. The centuries continued their slow work. Vines crept higher, roots spread deeper. The colors of the stone changed with the weather, golden in summer, gray in winter, silver under the moon. The air inside the amphitheater grew cooler, echoing less with time. The silence deepened, but it was not empty. It was full of memory, full of breath. There were moments when storms would pass over Rome, darkening the sky above the ruins. Lightning would trace the horizon, revealing the arches in flashes of pale light. The sound of rain would fill the arena like applause, steady and endless. In those hours, the Colosseum seemed to wake, remembering the noise of its youth, only to return again to rest. And when the storm faded and the first birds returned, the world felt cleaner. The stones glistened with moisture, their cracks darkened by the water, their surfaces cooled by wind. The city would shimmer under morning light, and the Colosseum, scarred and broken, would shine once more, calm, eternal, forgiving. As Rome grew and changed, the amphitheater remained its quiet anchor. New streets were laid around it, new homes rose in its shadow, yet nothing could diminish its presence. Even broken, it defined the horizon. It had lost its perfection, but gained something deeper. A sense of peace that perfection never knows. Visitors came from far away, drawn not by what the Colosseum had been, but by what it had become. They stood before it and felt time slowing. They walked its corridors and listened to the air, feeling the soft pulse of centuries beneath their feet. Artists sketched its profile, poets found words in its silence. Each saw in its ruin a reflection of their own impermanence. The Colosseum no longer belonged to emperors or architects, it belonged to time. And time, unlike men, is a gentle ruler. It takes slowly, it leaves traces, it transforms rather than destroys. The amphitheater had become the perfect expression of that truth. It was not a fallen monument, it was a living witness. Every fracture, every missing stone, every weathered line told the story of endurance. Its open side allowed the sky to enter, filling what was once shadow with light. Grass grew where marble had been, and wildflowers bloomed where crowds once stood. The ruin had become a garden, a quiet one, tended not by hands, but by the rhythm of the seasons. In that transformation lay its beauty. The Colosseum had moved from the glory of design to the grace of survival. It had become something more human, more compassionate. It no longer needed to impress, it simply existed, and that was enough. Its silence was no longer the absence of sound, but the presence of peace. At night, when the moon climbed high, its broken edge glowed faintly, catching the pale light like an old scar that still shines. The stars gathered above it, reflected faintly in the pools of rain below. The wind moved softly through its hollow corridors, carrying with it the scent of stone and age. The city around it slept, but the Colosseum remained awake, watching, breathing, remembering. And so, through the touch of earth and men, through loss and transformation, the Colosseum endured once more. It had given part of itself away, yet had not disappeared. Its story continued, quiet and unbroken, written now in ruin and resilience. It stood as proof that to be broken is not to be lost, and that what endures does so not through strength alone, but through acceptance. The Colosseum had learned to bend with the world, to yield without vanishing, to share its body with the city that had once built it. In doing so, it found a new kind of wholeness, one that no architect could design and no empire could command. A sleeping giant in the Middle Ages.
The Colosseum had fallen into its long sleep. What once rang with the sound of tens of thousands now held only the soft breath of the wind and the quiet shuffle of time. The broken walls no longer watched over emperors or crowds. Instead, they watched over silence, over seasons that passed like calm waves across the stone.
By the early centuries of the Middle Ages, the amphitheater stood as a vast and hollow skeleton at the heart of a changing Rome. The city had grown smaller, its great avenues narrowed to winding streets. Marble temples had turned into humble dwellings. Fountains that once poured endlessly were dry. Yet through all the transformations, the Colosseum remained no longer a monument of power, but a patient witness to endurance. The people of Rome did not fear it. To them, it was part of the landscape, familiar and steady, a presence both ancient and kind. They began to move closer to it again, drawn by its shelter and its stillness. Families built small houses within its arches, using the vast stone corridors as walls. Gardens sprouted in the open spaces, vines climbed over fallen columns, and the scent of herbs and smoke filled the air where once there had been sand and sound. Children played in the shadow of arches that reached toward the sky. They ran along paths once meant for spectators, their laughter echoing softly through the hollows. Cats hunted in the grass, and pigeons roosted in the cracks of the upper tiers. The Colosseum, once designed for spectacle, had become a quiet village of its own, a living body breathing through its ruins. In the mornings, smoke would rise gently from small chimneys built along the inner walls. The light filtered through broken arches, casting golden bands across the worn stone. Farmers brought their carts through its wide gates, selling fruit, bread, and milk. Traders set up tables beneath the arcades, offering cloth, tools, and trinkets. The amphitheater, which had once gathered people for a single purpose, now gathered them for life itself. The rhythm of the place had changed, but the peace of it remained. There were no more cheers, no more drums, no more shouts. Instead, there were footsteps, whispers, and the creak of wooden doors. The air was filled with the sounds of daily life, gentle, small, enduring. The Colosseum had become a sanctuary, not of faith, but of existence. Time softened its appearance further. Ivy climbed higher, its green weaving through grey stone, softening the edges of what had once been sharp and strong. Moss grew in the cracks where rainwater pooled. Flowers bloomed in the crevices of fallen blocks. Birds nested where statues had once stood. The ruin had become its own small ecosystem, a place where nature and humanity lived side by side, neither disturbing the other. There were moments of change, moments of care. The people who lived within its shadow began to see it as protection. When the city outside became uncertain, the Colosseum felt safe. Its walls, thick and ancient, guarded them from wind and weather. The great arches caught the light and gave shade, depending on the hour. The place had been made for crowds, yet now it embraced solitude. Travelers who came to Rome in those centuries often wrote about the amphitheater. They described it as a sleeping giant, immense, silent, half covered by plants, yet strangely alive. They saw smoke curling from its interior, heard the distant sounds of voices and bells, and marveled at how life had taken root where once there had been spectacle. To some, it seemed a miracle that such a structure could still stand after so many generations. To others, it felt inevitable, as though the Colosseum had always intended to outlast those who built it, to live quietly in whatever form time allowed. It had become both ruin and refuge, both monument and home. As the centuries turned, its role shifted once more. The markets faded, the homes within slowly emptied, and the vegetation grew thicker. The amphitheater began to withdraw into itself again, as if preparing for another sleep. The people of Rome continued to pass by, still comforted by its presence, even as they built new lives beyond its walls. During the long nights, the Colosseum breathed softly with the wind. The stars traced their paths above it, the moonlight touching every curve of its arches. Owls called from its upper levels, their voices low and haunting, blending with the sound of rustling leaves. The ruins stood serene, its vastness both ancient and intimate, its silence deep enough to hold the dreams of the city. Seasons came and went without urgency. In spring, the air inside the amphitheater filled with the fragrance of grass and flowers. In summer, the stones grew warm and shadows shortened under the sun. Autumn brought the soft rustle of falling leaves, collecting in the corridors like whispers. And winter, when it arrived, brought quiet rain that shimmered against the old walls, washing them clean again. The Colosseum's endurance was no longer measured in years, but in moments. The flight of a bird, the sound of distant bells, the way sunlight touched the stone. Its beauty had changed. It was no longer grand or perfect. It was gentle, worn, and forgiving. It had moved beyond the glory of empire and settled into the grace of stillness. For those who walked through it then, it was difficult to imagine the noise it had once held. The silence felt complete, as if the very air had chosen to forget. Yet beneath that quiet, the memory of its past lingered, not as echo but as feeling. The Colosseum seemed to hum faintly, a vibration in the stone, a slow and steady breath that had never stopped. Sometimes, when the light of dawn slipped through the upper arches, the ruin appeared almost whole again. The golden glow filled its interior, erasing the cracks and gaps, and for a moment, the Colosseum looked as it once did, complete, harmonious, eternal. But as the light shifted, the illusion faded and the truth returned, half standing, half fallen, fully alive. The people of the Middle Ages came to accept it not as a symbol of the past, but as a presence in the present. They no longer asked what it had been or what it meant. They simply lived beside it as one lives beside a river or a mountain, something older, steady, and beyond change. It had become part of their world, as natural as the sky above it. And in that quiet acceptance, the Colosseum found peace. It no longer belonged to emperors or architects, to history or memory. It belonged to time itself. Its stones, worn smooth by centuries of wind and touch, no longer needed to prove anything. They simply existed, holding the warmth of the day and the cool of the night, steady in their place. The sleeping giant of Rome rested easily. The city moved on around it. People came and went, kings rose and fell, new buildings rose from old foundations. But the Colosseum remained, unchanged in its essence. It was not forgotten nor revered. It simply was. And so through the long centuries of the Middle Ages, the amphitheater stood as a companion to the city, neither loud nor lost, but quietly alive. Its great arches framed the sky, its broken edges caught the light, and its heart, once filled with noise, now held only the sound of the wind. The Colosseum slept, but its dream was peaceful. It dreamed of sunlight and rain, of laughter and silence, of the endless rhythm of life returning again and again. It dreamed of being not the monument of an empire, but the heartbeat of a city that refused to fade. And when the dawn returned each day, touching its weathered face with gold, the sleeping giant seemed to wake just enough to breathe again. Slow, calm, eternal. The Renaissance Awakening. After many quiet centuries, the Colosseum began to awaken again. Its sleep had been deep and peaceful, filled with the slow rhythm of rain and wind, but the world around it was changing. The people of Rome, who had once lived beside it, as if beside an old friend, started to look at it with new eyes. Curiosity returned to the city. The great silence of the Middle Ages began to stir with thought, and from that thought, the age of rediscovery began. The Renaissance unfolded like the first light of dawn. Knowledge, art, and curiosity stretched their limbs after a long rest. The ruins of the ancient world, forgotten but never gone, became sources of wonder once more. The Colosseum stood among them, waiting quietly as painters, architects, and poets came to study its form. Its arches, half in shadow, half in sun, drew them close. To look upon it was to see not ruin, but perfection beneath time's touch. Artists set up their easels before it, sketching the curves of its structure, tracing every arch and shadow. They did not paint it as broken, but as eternal. To them, the missing stones and fallen walls did not mark loss, but transformation, a living conversation between past and present. The way light played upon its surface told a story older than empires, a story of endurance, of form surviving function. The Colosseum became a teacher. From its design, architects learned again what it meant to build with harmony and proportion. The symmetry of its arcs, the balance of its mass, the grace of its circle, all became lessons in stone. They studied the rhythm of its construction, the perfect alignment of its tiers, the subtle play of light through its corridors. It was no longer only a monument, it was a manual, written not in words, but in shape and silence. Travelers from distant lands came to see it. Scholars copied its measurements, traced its foundations, and wrote of its endurance. The Colosseum entered their drawings, their journals, their dreams. It became a symbol not of conquest but of continuity, a reminder that beauty, once created, could sleep through centuries and still awaken untouched. The people of Rome, too, began to see it differently. The amphitheater that had once sheltered families and markets now became a place of reflection. They no longer built within its arches, but stood outside them, gazing upward. They spoke of its proportions, its strength, its quiet dignity. The broken half, open to the sky, was not seen as flaw, but as grace. It revealed the interior of genius, the heart of the structure laid bare for the world to learn from. In those years, painters like Raphael and Michelangelo walked among its corridors. They placed their hands upon its stones, tracing the marks left by ancient tools. To them, it was more than ruin, it was living evidence of creation. In its silence, they felt the pulse of the human spirit, steady, patient, unbroken. They carried its lessons into their own works, translating its geometry into domes, arches, and light. The Colosseum became both inspiration and mirror. The age that rediscovered art found itself reflected in its form. It taught that greatness was not the noise of empire, but the balance of design, the endurance of idea. It reminded those who studied it that beauty did not need to shout, it only needed to remain. As the Renaissance deepened, the Colosseum found a new kind of reverence. People came not to use it, but to behold it. The ruin that had once been scavenged for stone now became something to protect. The city began to understand that in preserving the past, it preserved part of itself. The broken walls became sacred not through faith, but through memory, a shared connection to those who came before. Morning light once again filled its arches, and the sound of footsteps echoed through its corridors, not of crowds, but of wanderers, scholars, and artists. They came with paper and ink, measuring tapes and notebooks. They came to listen. In the gentle quiet of the arena, they heard not the noise of history, but its hum, deep, steady, forgiving. The world beyond Rome was also waking. Across Europe, cities rediscovered their own ruins, their forgotten stories, their hidden beauty. But none matched the Colosseum. It stood as the symbol of all that had endured, the great circle of stone that had watched the world fall asleep and then awaken again. During the soft light of evening, when the sun sank low behind the hills, its shadows stretched long across the city. Artists would sit for hours watching the way the light changed its color, from gold to rose, from rose to gray. In that shifting light, the ruin seemed alive, as if breathing once more. For the people of the Renaissance, this was not nostalgia, it was gratitude. They saw in the Colosseum not what had been lost, but what had survived. It was proof that art, once born, never truly dies. It may fade, crumble, or sleep, but it waits, patiently, like stone, to be rediscovered. The amphitheater's silence became a kind of music for that age. Poets wrote of it as if it were a living being, an ancient soul speaking without words. Travelers described it as a mirror of time itself. One half standing, one half fallen, both perfect. And in its quiet endurance, the Colosseum became the image of the human spirit's persistence. At night, the stars returned above its broken crown. The city below glowed softly with torchlight, and the ruins stood between earth and sky, luminous and calm. The breeze carried the faint scent of olive and dust, the whisper of leaves, the murmur of distant fountains. The Colosseum had been many things: arena, fortress, home. Now it had become a symbol of learning, of renewal, of light returning after long darkness. Through all the admiration, the ruin remained unchanged. It did not demand praise, it did not move or respond. It simply existed, as it always had, allowing the world to come and go around it. In its silence, it carried a lesson, that endurance itself is an act of creation. The Renaissance was a time of rediscovery, but also of reflection. As artists painted and philosophers wrote, they began to understand that the Colosseum's true greatness lay not in its size, but in its calm. It had been built to hold the energy of crowds, yet it now held the serenity of centuries. It had once symbolized strength, now it symbolized peace. And so the Colosseum, after sleeping for 1,000 years, opened its eyes to a world reborn. The city around it shimmered with new life, new art, new sound. Yet within its arches the same quiet reigned. The past and present met there, not in conflict, but in harmony. In the cool of morning, when mist drifted through its corridors, the ruin seemed almost to sigh, a deep, slow breath of contentment. It had outlasted empire, time, and silence itself. Now it watched, as humanity remembered beauty, remembered itself. The Renaissance came and went like sunlight across its stones. Generations passed, and the Colosseum remained. Painters aged, architects built, poets dreamed, and still the great circle stood, unchanged and unhurried. It did not seek attention, yet it received it. It did not speak, yet it inspired countless voices. When you walk within it now, you can still feel that quiet rebirth. The walls, warm from the morning sun, carry the memory of that awakening. The air inside feels thick with centuries of breath, of thought, of creation. And if you stand long enough, you might feel it again, that moment when the world remembered beauty, and beauty remembered the world. Guardians of Time.
By the time the world stepped into new centuries, the Colosseum had become more than a ruin. It had become memory itself, a living vessel of everything that had come before. The Renaissance had awakened admiration, and now admiration turned into care. Artists had painted it, poets had written of it, travelers had dreamed before its arches, and so quietly humanity began to protect what time had left standing.
Rome had changed again. The streets grew busier, the city expanded, and the modern world began to take its first slow breaths. But in the midst of it all, the Colosseum remained unmoved. It was no longer hidden by ivy and silence. It had returned to the heart of attention, standing in the open like an old friend finally recognized again. People came from every corner of Europe to see it. Some came to draw its proportions, others came only to stand within its circle and listen to the echo of their own footsteps. It was no longer seen as the ghost of empire, but as a mirror of humanity itself. Fragile, imperfect, yet enduring. The air inside the amphitheater had changed. Where once there had been dust and stillness, there was now the murmur of voices, the sound of pens scratching across paper, the low hum of admiration. Travelers described the experience not as sightseeing, but as pilgrimage, not of faith, but of remembrance. They stood where time had folded itself into stone and felt, for a moment, the vastness of history made calm. Painters continued to capture it, though now they sought not perfection, but presence. They painted the cracks, the weeds, the fallen arches, the play of sunlight over decay. They understood that beauty lived not in what was preserved, but in what persisted. Every brushstroke seemed to whisper that ruin itself was a form of grace. The Colosseum became a subject of study as well as art. Scholars traced its geometry, engineers marveled at its endurance. The new sciences of structure and preservation found lessons in its survival. Even as portions crumbled, its core held strong, defying both time and chance. Rome began to change its relationship with its past. No longer did people take stones from the Colosseum to build something new. Instead, they brought new stones to keep the old ones standing. The act of taking gave way to the act of keeping. And in that gesture, something shifted in the human heart. A recognition that memory itself required guardians. In the 17th century, small efforts began. Walls were reinforced, fallen stones were documented, the structure was mapped and measured. The world had learned to value the old not as a resource but as a teacher. The Colosseum, once stripped and broken, became the subject of preservation, not for what it had been, but for what it represented. It was during these years that the amphitheater gained its quiet title, the Monument of Time. Not because of its age, but because of what it showed. The way time could wound and still leave beauty behind, the way ruin could outshine perfection. Visitors in these centuries often described standing beneath its arches as standing inside eternity. The scale of it seemed beyond comprehension, yet it carried no arrogance. Its vastness felt human, its silence kind. The cracks that ran through its walls looked like veins of memory, each one carrying the pulse of something that refused to end. As the centuries turned, the Colosseum became a subject of fascination for writers and thinkers. They saw in it the story of civilization itself, not the triumph of conquest, but the endurance of creation. Empires rise and vanish, but the work of human hands, when made with purpose, outlives them all. At night, the ruin glowed faintly under the lanterns of the city. Travelers walking along the ancient streets would see its shadow stretch across the stones, vast and calm. Sometimes the moon would rise behind it, filling its hollow arches with light, and in that glow the Colosseum seemed almost whole again, not restored, but remembered. The people of Rome too changed how they looked at it. Children were no longer raised within its walls, families no longer built homes beneath its arches. Instead, they walked past it as one might pass a relative, old, silent, but deeply loved. It had become part of their identity, woven into their sense of belonging. The 18th century brought new eyes and new wonder. Artists of the Grand Tour, young painters, poets and scholars, traveled to Rome from across Europe. They came seeking inspiration, and they found it waiting in the Colosseum's calm. For many, it was their first encounter with age itself, the realization that beauty could survive even in fracture. They wrote of it endlessly. Some called it the heart of the ancient world. Others called it the breath of time. They stood at dawn when light entered the arena in slow golden shafts and watched dust rise like mist. They stood at dusk when the arches turned violet and the air grew cool, and felt something they could not describe. Not sorrow, not nostalgia, but peace. The ruin was no longer sleeping, it was awake, though it moved slowly, as if time itself had chosen to walk beside it. Every new century seemed to approach it with gentler hands, as though afraid to disturb its rest. In the 19th century, the idea of preservation grew stronger. Architects studied not how to rebuild, but how to protect. Wooden supports were added beneath weakened arches, new pathways laid to prevent further wear. Every effort, though small, carried the same intention: to let the Colosseum remain as it was, to allow time to leave its marks without taking everything away. And so it endured, half open to the sky, half held by the earth. The wind that passed through its hollows had carried centuries of voices, now reduced to whispers. The stone that had once trembled with noise now vibrated only with light. The Colosseum had outlasted the purpose for which it was built, and in doing so had become something larger, a keeper of time, a teacher of stillness. People began to see it as a meditation in stone, a lesson carved by centuries. It did not resist decay, but it did not collapse into it either. It lived in balance, the perfect middle between presence and absence. Even as the modern world began to hum beyond its walls, the ruin stayed patient. Carriages passed by, streets filled with voices, and still the Colosseum held its quiet center. Its silence became its strength. It did not need to move to remind the world of movement. It did not need to speak to be understood. At sunrise, it shone pale gold again, the same color it had been 2,000 years before. The air around it trembled slightly with heat, carrying the faint scent of dust and sunlight. Birds moved through its upper arches, their wings cutting clean through the beams of light. Beneath them, the stone held firm, cracked, scarred, but eternal. The Colosseum had become what it was always meant to be: a guardian of time, a reminder that creation, when made with care, can survive the weight of centuries. It asked for nothing, gave everything, and stood as witness to all that passed before it. And as the 19th century came to a close, the city around it grew louder, brighter, faster. But within those ancient walls, time still moved slowly, each hour folding gently into the next. The ruin remained as it always had, calm, patient, awake. The Colosseum no longer told the story of Rome alone. It told the story of endurance itself. It whispered to every visitor the same quiet truth: that time does not destroy, it transforms. That what breaks can still be whole. That silence, too, can carry a voice that never fades. And in that whisper, in that patient breath of stone, the Colosseum continued its eternal vigil, the guardian of all that time remembers and all that humanity chooses not to forget. Light and shadow in the modern age. As the 20th century unfolded, the Colosseum entered a new kind of life. The city around it had grown wide and bright, filled with the hum of engines, the voices of travelers, the distant echo of progress. And yet, in the middle of all that sound, the great circle of stone remained still. It stood where it had always stood, unchanged in purpose, unhurried by the world that now raced past its feet. The modern age arrived with light. Electric lamps rose through the streets of Rome, casting new shadows against the old walls. For the first time, the Colosseum glowed not only beneath the moon, but beneath man-made light. Soft, golden, endless. It no longer disappeared into darkness at night. It became a part of the city's rhythm once again, shining quietly as if it had learned a new way to dream. People came in greater numbers than ever before. Trains brought them from distant countries, airplanes carried them from across oceans. They arrived with cameras and notebooks, with wonder and reverence. Some spoke softly as they walked through the arches, others said nothing at all. They looked up at the vast ring of stone and felt the same stillness that had held through the centuries. It was as if time itself slowed for them here, folding gently around the ruin like a cloak. The Colosseum welcomed them without judgment. It had seen too many lives, too many changes to be surprised by anything. Children laughed in its corridors, their voices echoing like small bells. Elderly travelers leaned against its walls, their hands tracing the cool surface of the stone. Artists stood at its base, sketching the same curves that had inspired their ancestors. The amphitheater, once a place of spectacle, had become a place of peace. Restoration continued through the decades. Careful hands cleaned the surfaces, repaired what could be repaired, and strengthened what remained. The work was slow, respectful, patient. The kind of work that understands the value of silence. Each repair was a conversation between centuries, the present listening to the past forgiving the present. The city changed shape around it. Roads curved and widened, lights grew brighter, buildings rose and fell, but the Colosseum stood calm at the center, the one constant in a sea of movement. It had once been surrounded by fields, then by ruins, and now by the pulse of a living city. Yet no matter how much the world changed, the air within its walls remained the same, quiet, cool, and filled with light. There were moments when modernity pressed close. Traffic circled its base, the sound of engines replacing the sound of footsteps. The air carried the hum of distant conversations, the rhythm of modern life. But even then, the Colosseum seemed to exist slightly apart, like a dream the city refused to wake from. The light of evening still touched its upper arches in gold. The wind still moved softly through its openings. The same moon that watched over emperors still rose above its crown. In the daylight, tourists filled the arena floor, cameras flashing like small sparks of curiosity. They stood where the sand had once been, looking upward through the broken ring of sky. Guides spoke in many languages, their words mingling into a gentle hum. Children ran along the stone paths, their laughter drifting upward like music. The Colosseum absorbed it all. The footsteps, the voices, the sound of life returning. and turned it into something calm. At night, when the crowds left and the lights remained, the amphitheater shone in silence. The glow from the lamps below rose across its face, soft and golden, like the return of eternal daylight. The city beyond was alive with movement, but within the circle, everything slowed again. The air grew still, the light trembled, and for a moment it felt as if the Colosseum was breathing, the slow, steady breath of a world that refuses to end. Through wars and peace, through rebuilding and renewal, the ruin endured. Bombs fell near it, but the amphitheater held. Its stones absorbed the shock of the modern century and stayed firm, as if the ground itself remembered its duty to protect it. When the noise of conflict passed, the Colosseum stood once more in the sunlight, unchanged, as if reminding humanity of what survives when everything else fades. Visitors came in waves year after year. They walked through its arches, took photographs, whispered stories, touched the walls. Some stayed only minutes, others lingered for hours. All carried a piece of its silence with them when they left. The Colosseum had become more than history. It had become memory made visible, the physical shape of time that still breathes among us. The city began to protect it even more carefully. Fences were added, paths preserved, plants trimmed from its walls. Conservation became not just a task, but a devotion. Experts studied the cracks, monitored the weathering, and worked to keep the balance between age and care. They understood that the Colosseum could not be made new again. It could only be allowed to remain itself. And so it did. Through all the decades, through all the changes, it stayed the same. Not frozen, not forgotten, but gently alive. Each sunrise turned it gold, each sunset bathed it in red, and each night restored it to silver. The Colosseum had once been the center of spectacle. Now it was the center of stillness. For the people of Rome, it became something more than stone. It became the heart of their city, a reminder of endurance, of patience, of beauty that does not fade. Weddings, concerts, and celebrations began to take place near it, each event reflecting not glory, but gratitude. The ruin was not a backdrop to their lives, it was a companion. When the rain fell, it filled the ancient grooves of the floor, creating small mirrors where the arches reflected. Children watched their own faces ripple in the water, as if time itself had bent to play. In summer, the air shimmered with heat, and the scent of warm stone rose into the afternoon. In winter, fog drifted low, wrapping the amphitheater in a soft veil, as if protecting it from the chill. Through every season, the Colosseum seemed unchanged. And yet, every moment within it was unique. The light never fell the same way twice. The wind never moved through its corridors in the same rhythm. The ruin lived in repetition and renewal, in constancy and change, just as all living things do. To stand there now is to feel that delicate balance between past and present, between weight and air, between shadow and light. The Colosseum no longer belongs to empire or nation. It belongs to everyone who pauses before it and listens. Its silence welcomes all languages, all hearts, all times. In the deep hours of the night, when even the traffic has quieted and the city sleeps, the Colosseum returns to its truest form. The moonlight glides along its edges, turning the stone pale and soft. The arches cast long shadows upon the ground. The air grows cool and the world seems to hold its breath. It is in those hours that the ruin feels most alive, not as a remnant, but as a presence. It stands as it always has, still, patient, eternal. Its beauty does not ask to be seen, but it is seen. Its silence does not ask to be heard, but it is felt. It teaches without speaking that all things cities, empires, people move through light and shadow, and that in the quiet between them lies peace. And so as the modern age rushes forward, the Colosseum remains behind, not lost, not forgotten, but waiting. It does not chase time, it lets time return to it. It does not fear change, it has lived through too much of it. It is the breath between centuries, the calm beneath the noise, the light that never fades. Every dawn that rises over Rome touches its arches with the same soft gold it has known for 2,000 years. Every night, the stars still rest above it. And somewhere between those two eternal lights, the Colosseum continues to breathe, slow, steady, and timeless. The eternal breath. The city rests beneath the quiet of night. The air is cool, the lights of Rome fade softly across the horizon, and at the center of it all, the Colosseum stands in silence. The sound of traffic grows distant, the footsteps slow, and the voices fall away. Only the soft rhythm of wind moves through tea. The Colosseum has seen everything. Empires rise and fall, people come and go, generations pass like shadows on its walls. Yet through every age it remains. It does not change to follow the world. It simply endures. The cracks along its surface are quiet lines of memory. The missing stones are spaces where time has touched but not erased. The ruin does not hide its age. It wears it like. In the first light of morning, the air around it glows gold. The sun reaches the upper arches and fills them with warmth. The shadows fade. The stone, pale and cool, comes alive again for another day. Birds move slowly through the openings, their wings glinting in the sun. The city wakes, the voices return, the streets fill, and the Colosseum watches, silent. It no longer belongs to one people or one time. It belongs to all who stand before it and listen. Its story has no single author. It is written in the touch of hands, in the echo of footsteps, in the breath of wind moving through stone. Each visitor leaves a moment behind, and the ruin gathers them all, storing them in its stillness. Over the centuries, the Colosseum has learned to exist beyond purpose. It no longer performs or entertains. It simply stands. Its stillness is not emptiness, it is presence. A reminder that beauty can survive without movement, that meaning can remain even when sound is gone. The city may rush forward, the years may pass quickly, but the Colosseum stays in its rhythm. Slow, even, patient. As the day moves on, the light changes again. By afternoon, it becomes bright and sharp, cutting across the walls and filling the corridors with warmth. Tourists move like streams of color beneath the open sky. Their cameras click, their voices mix in different languages. Children run across the floor where sand once lay. The noise is soft, almost distant, as if the Colosseum absorbs it, turning it gentle before sending it back to the air. Then the sun begins to fall. Shadows lengthen across the ground. The stone grows cool again. The light fades from gold to silver, from silver to grey. The last visitors leave, their footsteps slow, their eyes glancing back once more before they disappear into the city. And when the gates close, silence returns, deep, wide, complete. In that silence, the Colosseum becomes something else. The modern city fades to a hum beyond its walls. The stars appear above, one by one, bright against the black sky. The moon rises and the ancient stone turns pale under its light. The wind moves softly, carrying a low sound, not a voice, not a song, but a steady rhythm, the rhythm of air passing through space, the rhythm of time breathing. The Colosseum no longer resists decay, It accepts it. The missing pieces are part of what it is, the weathered edges, the worn stairs, the open sky above the arena. All of them belong to its shape. It is whole in its incompleteness. It is alive in its quiet. It does not need restoration to be perfect. It is perfect in remaining. Every day begins and ends here in the same calm way. The world outside changes, new buildings, new streets, new lives, but the ruin stays patient, observing, steady. It carries no fear of being forgotten. It knows that as long as light touches it, it will be remembered. Sometimes, in the early morning, the mist drifts low across the arena floor. It moves slowly, wrapping around the lower arches. The stone disappears for a moment, hidden by cloud, and then reappears, as if the earth itself was exhaling. That is the way the Colosseum lives now, as breath. Not the breath of people, but the breath of time. Inhale, exhale, day and night, century after century. It has become a rhythm for the city, a point of balance, a still heart within the movement of millions. Rome changes, but its oldest heartbeat remains the same. The Colosseum no longer tells a story of power or victory. It tells a story of endurance. It tells of how things built with purpose can outlast the hands that made them. It tells of how silence can hold as much meaning as sound. It tells of how to remain, not by strength, but by patience. As the night deepens, the moonlight glides slowly across its walls, filling every gap, every line, every hollow. The air cools, the stones rest, and the Colosseum stands motionless, neither past nor present, only now. The stars turn above, and the ruin feels almost weightless, as if it could float away into the dark sky.
Yet it stays, as it always has, anchored not by earth, but by memory. Its strength is no longer in its walls, but in its stillness. It holds nothing and everything at once, the sound of footsteps, the warmth of sunlight, the quiet of countless nights.
When dawn returns, it will all begin again. The first light touching the stone, the slow arrival of people, the quiet murmur of admiration, the steady pulse of time continuing without rush. The Colosseum will remain just as it always has, calm and waiting. In the endless circle of days and nights, it has become more than a monument. It is the shape of time itself, open to the sky, steady through all things. It does not need to speak. It does not need to move. It only needs to be. And as the light changes once more, as the city awakens, as the world continues to move, the Colosseum remains in its quiet truth. The breath of centuries, slow and endless, the silent rhythm of a world that never truly forgets.